And hello, everybody. Welcome back. This time, Chapter 4, Week 4, Planning Projects, Part 1. Planning is really where you spend a lot of time, that and the execution process group. So let's just get started. We'll spend a couple of weeks on planning. These are the learning objectives. Pause the slide as you will and review them is my recommendation. Now, I will offer that at the beginning, I just like to focus our time and attention. So in doing so, remember the C-suite developed a business case. Now, not every company is going to call it that. Some companies are going to use other terms or not produce anything at all. I've actually had to go create my own by looking up the topic of my project and strategic comments by a four-star general or others and use those as the business case. But theoretically, and for any exam, you'd want a business case. From the business case, you go and develop the project charter. We've talked about several times, and from the charter, you're going to develop a plan, right? A project plan. And so what you're doing is you're taking a very high level and you're trying to focus it like a funnel. So this is very high level. This is always high level, and this is detailed, right? But you need to go through this process in order to get a detailed plan that is aligned to the business case, okay? Otherwise, you're never going to get there. You make jumps. So the charter is very important. And even though the charter is high level and not detailed, in its high level, it's still measurable, right? So at the end of the project, I can take a look at the charter and make sure that we've completed those things. They are measurable, even if they're not detailed. So that's really where we're going through this. And all of this takes your work as a project manager. All of this takes integration. Integration is what you do. And this is really what we're going to focus on today. Okay? So here we go. Many people have heard the saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Notice on the last slide, I had Steve Covey. Steve Covey had the saying, begin with the end in mind. If you're not familiar with Steve Covey, I highly recommend it. His work, The Highly Effective Habits of Successful People, something in that regard. If you Google that, you're going to find he's done some phenomenal work. But one of the things he said was begin with the end in mind in this predictive type waterfall project management. That's how I apply it. Because successful project managers, right, they know how important it is to develop, refine, and follow the plans to meet the goals. And you can't develop and refine the plans unless you begin with the end in mind. Notice also the word refine, right? We've talked several times about a term, progressive elaboration, right? I've asked you to note it before and look it up. That's what we mean about refining. We also talk in terms of projects as it's iterative. That's very much similar to progressive elaboration, right? We're in an iteration. We think it's right. We learn something new. We've got to build that into it because we're trying to create something stable that will go into operations or maintenance and get used regularly. Another term that is similar that mean very much the same thing, progressive elaboration, iterative. And we also use a term in project management called rolling wave planning, okay? And those terms are very similar. Keep that in mind. That's what you're doing. And as you develop it and things change, progressively elaborate it, it's iterative, rolling wave planning, you will make, as a project manager, you will make trade-offs throughout. And that's a key word as a project manager. You're making trade-offs to keep things balanced in your project plan. So project planning should guide the execution, right? The plan is what we're going to execute in the execution process group. So the main purpose of building this detailed plan is to guide project execution in the very next process group. And the process group, as you recall, just means putting those processes together that you need to execute, to build this deliverable. That's what it's all about. Oh, I love this portion of the course that talks about what went wrong. That's well developed in the book, in the literature. I'd ask you to review that, but a lot of good lessons learned at that point. So here we are. Project planning. It is lengthy. There are more processes in project planning than in any. You'd expect that because A, you spend a lot of time there, and B, it's where you detail out your deliverable. But remember, this first process called integrate, or this first knowledge area called integration management, that's you. That's your knowledge area. That's your subject matter expertise. And we already did this before in initiating. We had developed a charter. Now we're going to develop the project management plan. Okay, and so that's going to be a major output to this planning process. You're going to have a project management plan, and every knowledge area is going to have a subsidiary plan that sits inside of your overall project management plan. So take scope management, for instance. You're going to build a scope management plan. That's going to be a sub-plan to your overall project management plan. We call it a subsidiary plan. So all of these knowledge areas, all the rest of them, will have subsidiary plans, which are all part of the project management plan. The overall project management plan is going to have subsidiary plans. Okay. So we start with integration management. Again, this is you. This is how you bring all processes together in project management. It's how you coordinate everything and keep it on track. The main output in planning is the project management plan. Again, your project management plan is going to have lots of subsidiary plans centered around the knowledge areas. Okay, and it's your job to keep them balanced. I can't have more scope than I have budget to handle that, right? I can't have more quality than the product requires from a cost perspective, right? And so the project management plan is used to integrate and coordinate all the activities going on. And so the plan is created, plans are created in the other knowledge areas. I just referred to those. Those are called subsidiary plans. Those are sub-plans to this overarching project management plan. It'll have sub-plans inside of it that support this overarching plan to produce your deliverable. And your role is integrating those plans to make sure they work together. And so that's why your knowledge area is called integration management. Part of the sub-plans are also going to include a baseline. There are 3 baselines in project management, 3 and only 3. We've talked about them. It's the triple constraint. That's a word we've used now for 3 weeks, triple constraint. That's scope, schedule, and cost. All right. I've talked about it as the iron triangle. All right. So here we go. This is the project management planning documents. Notice everything here is in the project management plan. In planning, you develop all of this. This is the project management plan. So you'll have these subsidiary plans that I just talked about. Every knowledge area has at least one subsidiary plan. Notice you'll also have the 3 baselines right here called the triple constraint that we've talked about now for 3 weeks. Triple constraint. That forms your iron triangle. This is a measure of success, right? But so is meeting the needs of the stakeholders. We've talked about that as well. We've also, last week, talked about our developmental approach, whether it was hybrid or agile or predictive/waterfall, and the life cycles that we'll be into. All that's part of your project management plan. The project management plan, here's the difference. If you're going to divide them, this one requires change control to change it. Once it's set, you must go through change control. Project documents do not. In fact, I'll change the color. Project documents actually are yours that you can change as you want, right? You don't need anybody's approval as a project manager to update the assumptions log, or to update the change log, or to update forecasts, or to update the milestone list. You have the power to do that without change control. But in the project management plan, once it's signed by the sponsor, it must go through change control in order to update it. So there are attributes of the project management plan. The key thing, remember the project management plan, it's in enough detail, you write it in enough detail that you don't want changes. That's the symbol for changes, the triangle. But you expect changes. Why do you expect changes? Well, because every project is unique. So you build enough detail, you think it's going to work, and you tailor it throughout. As you have changes, you send your project management plan back through change control. It's the only way you can update it on the left. You can only update it through the process called change control. On the right, the project documents, update them all day long as you desire. Okay. So some common elements in a project, of course, in a project plan. This is just a way to organize your project plan. You can use any format you desire. That's completely up to you. Here is some more from a sample project management plan where you detail out your management processes and your technical process. Now, one of the subsidiary plans you're going to have is the scope management plan. The scope is really all about objectives overall, and what it does is it details down to what are your project requirements. That's what scope is really about, defining the requirements of your project. And when you define the requirements, you're going to come up with a work breakdown structure in order to demonstrate that. A work breakdown structure. It's just a hierarchical showing of your project and how parts relate to each other. Okay? And that's a work breakdown structure. Now, the key in scope, it's one of your three baselines, is you're going to develop your scope baseline. That is what we say in project management is you are going to do the work and only the work, right? Don't do extra work. That would be a waste of resources in project management. So you're going to define the work breakdown structure, and that's going to help form your scope baseline. And that's the only work you're going to do as you develop your schedule, your budget, your quality plans, etc. And so a key to scope management is validation, right? So remember, I said project management in the predictive form, in the waterfall form, is all about risk. And so how do we control risk? How do we manage risk? Which is a spirit of control, right? And so we want to control risk. And one of the control functions in scope is validate scope. And that is always done with the customer. So actually, we take the deliverable to the customer and have them review it at the end of each phase to give us approval to go on. Notice that's different than Agile, which is going to have the customer as part of your team day in and day out. We are actually not having the customers part of the team day in and out, but bringing things to them. And we use a process called validate scope to ensure that we're on track. So there are lots of processes described in the scope management plan. That's really what the scope management plan does. The scope management plan details out how I'm going to run the entire scope process, including control. So part of scope management is collecting requirements, right? And a requirement is defined, this is a good definition to know. A requirement is a condition or capability that is necessary in the deliverable, the product, service, or result, right? It's a condition or capability necessary. That's a requirement. I make people justify their proposed requirements to me. I just don't take them. Either there's a government standard that mandates it, there's a company standard that mandates it, the client mandates it in the contract, something. You can't just throw at me requirements because that's not really part of the project as we go.